So just to introduce Giulietta, welcome Giulietta. I know you haven't said a word so far, but it is really lovely to have you here. I'm just
Mm.
going to read your bio so people know a little bit more about you. So Giulietta is a menstrual cycle nutritionist on a mission to show you how your menstrual cycle can be the key to accessing the most complete version of yourself. So through hormone healing nutrition, she aims to inspire you to align with the powers of your menstrual cycle and to deepen your connection to self so that you can explore and redefine what it means to live in harmony with your hormones. Giulietta's unconventional blend of hard science, which I love, and a love of spirituality have earned her the title of Hormone Whisperer, and she loves nothing more than weaving together her extensive biochemical knowledge of hormones with more intuitive ways of healing to help you live the best hormonal life. She is one of the co-hosts of the Femme Powered podcast that Hannah says she listens to. Wonderful. A show that explores how to navigate the world using the menstrual cycle as your guide so that you can show up in a way that honors your natural rhythms and enhances your inner power. Welcome, welcome, Giulietta. Really
Mm.
lovely to have you here.
You.
Okay, so I am going to hand over to Giulietta. She may want to expand more on the intro. She's got a really wonderful presentation lined up for us that she'll explain how that's all going to work and how you can kind of get your questions in and things like that.
All right, so hello everyone, and really, really nice to be here. And thank you, Gwen, for inviting me. We had such a great chat that day on Instagram. It's still reverberating now, right? So I just loved it when our energies met, and it was just a really wonderful chat. So thank you for having me. And hello everyone watching the recording or here live. Really, really great to be here. And yeah, I mean, my presentation pretty much covers all of it, but I am just obsessed with hormones, menstrual cycles, periods, perimenopause, menopause, everything. I'm very passionate about educating so we can feel empowered. I feel one of the things that we have really suffered with anyone who has a womb has basically been we've been gaslit for so many, like centuries, right? Like we are just always told it's in our heads, or we are sort of made to feel that we're being dramatic and everything else. So my big thing, my big why is to educate you so you can know what's happening in your body, you can advocate for yourself, and you can learn to love what it means to be hormonal. Because people sometimes say to me, ugh, hormonal, no one wants to be hormonal. I'm like, well, I do actually, and I'll tell you why, and I think I really want to start reframing what hormonal means. So I am going to, hi Sophia, nice to meet you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to do a presentation. Now, for the sake of it sort of like flow smoothly, I won't stop too many times to answer your questions whilst I'm doing it. But please, 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 please put them in the chat. If it's something that is really, really important, feel free to barge in and just unmute yourself and ask me. If it's like something that you're like, I need to have the answer right now, that's absolutely fine, right? Like, but otherwise it's quite clunky when you do presentations, and I'll be going in and out, and you'll get bored of me going in and out of my presentation, but that's it. But this is like really, women used to gather around campfires, and they used to share their hormone stories. They used to support each other in their hormone health. They used to care for each other's children. And this is kind of what I feel Zoom rooms are a bit like these days. These are like our versions of those campfires. So, I really like invite you to ask as many questions. You might want to have a pen and paper in case you've got thoughts as well that you might want to journal on later. And yeah, it's pretty much like a session for you. So, feel free to, like I said, go crazy in the chat. Right. So I call today's talk, It's Not Me, It's My Hormones, or is it? Because I feel we hear this a lot, right? We're like, it's not me, it's my hormones. And one of the things I want to weave in the whole time today is, what are our hormones? What is us? And how can we get to know them better? So this is like a tour of the intricacies. I mean, the human body is incredible, incredible. And, I feel sometimes the female body isn't given the same kind of like depth of attention that the male body, like for example, scientific studies are mainly based on male subjects. Why? Because our hormones mess up results. You know, we're a bit more kind of irregular and all of the things. So, you know, I really want to, it's all about, you know, a body with a menstrual cycle. Let's learn more about this and how we can support them, because I feel one of the issues is because we don't always know, we don't know how to support ourselves. So let me just try and, oh, yeah, there we go. So to make the most of our time together, please, like I said, pen and paper, make sure you got your distractions, you know, put away. And the other thing I would say to you is really have a think about the one emotion that you need right now. So, you know, what emotion do you want to call in to help you, like, just like enjoy this time together, get the most out of it? I think, who was it that said it when we came in? Hannah, you said, I loved what you said about you're being curious a lot of the time. I love curiosity. I think curiosity is probably one of the most powerful ways to approach life. I try to do it all the time because it stops you from going into that reactive state and you're like, oh, so I love that. Right, let me just pop here. Let me get my thing. Oh, where is it? Okay, so a little bit about me. My name is Giulietta. I've got lots of different titles and I change them as they go. But for today, I'm a menstrual cycle nutritionist. I'm a period coach. I'm also a podcast host. As we said in the introduction, I'm the hormone whisperer because I like to combine science with more intuitive ways of healing. I am a science geek. I absolutely love science. It's so good. I'm an ex-party animal, so I used to really love being on a dance floor. I still do occasionally. A fiercely loyal friend. If you are human design fans, I'm a generator. And astrologically, I have a lot of Aries. I have Sun, Moon, and Venus in Aries. So I have a lot of fire in me, and a lot of people quite often comment on that fire that I have. So and sometimes it needs putting out a little bit. But I do kind of really, I am that typical Aries, lots and lots of fire. So I want to share a bit with you my hormone story, because we all have one, and you might want to start thinking about your story. So my period started really early at the age of 9. In fact, in this photo, 3 months later, I got my period. And actually, when I found this photo recently, it broke my heart because I was so young and no one ever told me anything about periods or menstrual cycles. So I would say the first sort of 10 years of my hormone life were all about suppressing my menstrual cycle. I was highly ashamed of my body. I was highly ashamed of having periods. And I spent most of my time trying to hide the fact that I was having periods and that I was a woman. And it's not to like point the finger to, like, you know, my mom or my grandmother. They did what they could, but we just didn't have the same kind of education that we do nowadays. Then I went on the pill because that's what you do, right? Like, well, that's what you did in those days. I sort of marched myself to the doctor and I was like, I want to go on the pill. I don't really know why, but that's what you do when you become a woman. So I went on the pill. It really affected my mental health quite badly. I was on the pill for about a year, and it really changed the way I was looking at the world. I also bled continuously for that whole year. And every time I went back to the doctor, they told me that it was normal. They changed my pill 3 times and nothing happened. I still felt really awful. And looking back, I think that was the point when I started really wanting to take control of my body and listening to my body. I knew something wasn't right. So I came off the pill and I never went back on it again. And then you know, I had fairly like smooth sailing in terms of periods and all of that until at the age of 35, I was diagnosed with fibroids. Fibroids are benign growths inside the womb or sometimes in the muscle of the womb. Now, my story was I kept on going to the doctor, trying to get diagnosed. I was told it was normal to have heavier periods at this point in your life. So I had to really push very hard to get a scan. In fact, actually, I eventually I had to pay for a private scan. And even privately, when the results came through, I was told there was nothing there. And I asked to see the results, and the report said there was 2 tiny fibroids. So I challenged the consultant and I said, well, it says here there's some fibroids. And she was like, yeah, but they're too small to cause any problems. And I was like, well, I know they're causing me problems. And I said, what are my options? And she said to me, you can go on the pill or you can take medication that sort of slows down the heavy bleeding. And I said, well, I don't want to do either of those. And she just looked at me blankly like, well, I can't help you. And so I said, I would like to try and manage these with nutrition. And she actually said to me, don't be ridiculous. I still remember those words. And, you know, like there's nothing like being told not to be ridiculous to really fire you up. The Aries in me was like, oh, yes. And that's when my quest for, you know, healing myself really came in. I'd already been doing nutrition for about 5 years by that point, but this is when I started specializing in hormones, and this is when I started looking at how to support myself. I am now 47, and my fibroids have not grown since I was 35 because I monitor them. I work hard on my nutrition. I get acupuncture, and I know what I need to do to look after myself. So, you know, this is not the miracle story of them disappearing, but they have not grown, which I feel is a huge testament to how we can really support ourselves if we have the knowledge. Then at 37, I started coming across something called cyclical living, which I'm going to talk about quite a lot today, which is working with the phases of your menstrual cycle. That was a game changer for me because for many years, I used to beat myself up morning, noon, and night. Like, why can't I wake up and feel the same every day? Why can't I do the same workouts in the gym? Why can't I eat the same food? And I thought I was a failure. And when I discovered cyclical living, it changed everything for me and for my clients. It was a real like game changer. And then I'm happily tootling along, enjoying cyclical living. And then perimenopause hits me at 38. So I only really got one good year of cyclical living. I still live cyclically now, to be honest with you. And perimenopause for me really started with extreme mood swings, like really, really extreme mood swings. Now, when you go online and you look at perimenopause, it tells you stuff about, oh, it's a couple of years before your periods end or whatever. I beg to differ. I honestly believe perimenopause for most women starts in our mid-30s, and it starts with a drop of progesterone, which we're going to talk about today. And that drop can cause significant mental health issues. So I usually see the mood swings being the first thing to come up. And, you know, I really don't, yeah, it's important not to underplay how extreme these were because I was heavily, heavily affected. And, you know, I even started having suicidal thoughts. And I knew it wasn't me, but I couldn't control them. And I'm so glad I reached out. I told my husband, I reached out to hormone practitioners to support me because I needed that support, you know. You can't always support yourself. And then I'm still in perimenopause. 9 years later, I'm in a much, much better place. I'm really supporting myself with lots of things. But I have faced other challenges, and I basically am now working through mold-related illness, which is basically I have been exposed to mold for possibly the last 17 years in my flat in London, and that has affected my skin very badly. Candida is a yeast that grows because of mold, and it has affected my hormones as well, which is I'm actually going, I was telling Gwen earlier, I'm actually moving to Spain at the end of this week because I've had enough. But that's where I am today. But hormonally, I'm in a good place, but it's not, can you see there's all these challenges, you know, and just because you're okay here doesn't mean you know, that things come along, things change. So it is like a massive long journey with your hormone story. So what we're going to cover today, what are hormones? Getting to know the main reproductive hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, how to feed your hormones, so how to nourish them, why we're not meant to feel the same every day, the inner seasons model, how we can use that to support ourselves, perimenopause, what the hell is happening to me, and menopause, is it all doom and gloom? So what are hormones? You know, what are they? Because sometimes we talk about hormones all the time, and sometimes I wonder, do we even know what hormones are? So they are basically chemical messengers, and they travel around the body and they go into cells to transmit information. And they literally influence everything, how we look, how we feel, our moods, our cravings, our sleep. Everything is governed by hormones, and there are many, many different hormones. We can't possibly go into all of them. So I'm mainly referring to the reproductive hormones. So keeping them balanced is really key, but actually also knowing that we have fluctuations, that's also really, really important. And like I said earlier with my story, I kept on trying to feel the same every day, which just was not working. So very quick science sort of run through. This is what we call the endocrine system. These are all the glands and areas of the body that are involved in hormone health. So you can see we've got brain areas involved. We've got the thyroid, the thymus, the adrenals, the pancreas, the ovaries. There's a whole system of glands interconnected and communicating all the time. And what I really want to point to are these two here, the hypothalamus, which is one area of the brain, and then the pituitary, which is this tiny, tiny, tiny thing right in the middle of the brain. And these two are always talking to each other. The hypothalamus measures hormones in the blood, and then the pituitary kind of interprets that, and then also tells the hypothalamus what to tell the rest of the body. So it's this massive feedback system. So sort of bearing this in mind, this is why our perception of life is so important, right? Because the brain is constantly taking in what's going on around us. And I'm not telling you to have like a toxically positive outlook to life, because that's not what it's about. But what I'm telling you is having that awareness. That's why earlier I said curiosity is a great one, because if you get curious, you're not going like, ah, you're kind of like, huh. And that honestly can be a bit of a game changer when it comes to our hormones. So, you know, what messages are you sending your brain? And are they ones of love, ones of safety, ones of nourishment, ones of connection? Or possibly, are they ones of threat, of fear, of scarcity, or danger? And I'm not, because we are going to feel fear and we are going to feel threatened sometimes, but are you mainly in that scarcity danger mindset, or are you showing yourself a bit of love and nourishment? I love always thinking about what messages is sending myself, like if I drink a glass of water when I wake up, everybody always goes on about it, but most of my clients are like, oh, can't be bothered. I'm like, yeah, but think about it. Drinking that glass of water sends hydration to your body. It lets your brain know that there is enough water, that there is abundance of water, that you're looking after it, that it's not, you're not in the middle of a desert. And all these things are really important. So I really love asking myself this question literally about a million times a day, which is like, what messages am I sending my brain? And it also gives you this great sense of control, doesn't it? Or like being able at least to help yourself, because you think, well, what messages am I sending and what messages can I change? So am I scrolling? Am I doom scrolling for an hour before going to bed? Or am I reading something that's bringing me joy? Or am I listening to a meditation? We have choices, and these impact our hormones massively. Also, I really love this. Look at this. Look at the chakra system and look at this, look at how everything is aligned here, and then the chakra system, how similar it is, how wonderful that this ancient system of healing really knew what it was talking about, and how we can blend these things together. I really, really, really love this. So, I would argue you are your hormones. They influence everything. And yes, sometimes we don't want to feel the way we do, but we understanding why we're feeling the way we do can really be very, very empowering. So now we're going to get a bit more like sciencey. We're going to go through the different types of hormones, the main ones that sort of we're talking about today, really in terms of like female health. And they break down really into the sex ones. So the reproductive, so that's like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. It's not just for men. And women do need good levels of testosterone, especially when we're transitioning into the perimenopausal, menopausal kind of world. The stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, these are the ones we produce when we're super stressed, the fight or flight ones, all of that kind of sensation. And then we've got thyroid hormone. And it's very important because this controls metabolism. It can control also our moods. It controls lots of different mechanisms in the body. And these all work together. I like to call them actually, it's not my idea. I stole this from, I think I was taught this at uni actually, but this is the hormone triangle, right? These three groups of hormones work together. They're always working together. So, if you just think about, oh, I just want to balance my estrogen, but your stress is through the roof, it's unlikely you're going to experience real balancing in estrogen, because they're always going round and round, feeding off each other. The brain, the hypothalamus is like, oh, we've got a lot of stress, and it then impacts all the other ones. So it's hard to see them. We shouldn't see them in isolation. We really should see them as part of this beautiful pyramid. And what I will say, I mean, they are all interconnected, but the other thing I will say is that the body will always prioritize making stress hormones over the sex hormones and the thyroid hormones. Why? Because stress hormones keep you alive, you know, like they're the ones that keep you from like danger, basically. So if you are very, very, very stressed, you will potentially experience imbalances in the other ones. So we always have to be really mindful of how we're managing our stress. I mean, when I came on the call earlier, I was listening to you all like discussing how your week had been. And from what I've gathered, the lovely Gwen gives you daily tasks. So to help you manage your stress and really help you just sort of calm down that nervous system. And, you know, that is beautifully, beautifully hormone balancing. So let's get to know our sex hormones today. I really want to focus on these, even though I have obviously said there's stress and thyroid hormones. These are the ones I want us to look at in a bit more detail. So estrogen, often called the Beyonce hormone, and that was there's a great book called Period Power by Maisie Hill. And I really recommend you get hold of that one if you're interested in learning more about menstrual cycles. She is one who called the estrogen the Beyonce hormone. And what I really want you to do is, as we go through these three hormones, is really start thinking about how you feel these hormones feel for you. I think there's something really powerful when we learn to understand how these hormones feel in our bodies, you know, I think, Sophia, you were talking about, you know, when you're taking the HRT, or when you were feeling, you know, you're feeling sometimes it's not the quite the right HRT, and the mental health stuff. These are potentially fluctuations in these hormones, not enough, too much, etc. They can really, really impact us. But these are the kind of major features of estrogen. They make us feel super outgoing, energetic, very sassy, very like, ooh, you know, here I am. But also they make us estrogen makes us people pleasing. So we say yes to absolutely everything. Now, you know, let's think about this, because this is a bit of a funny one sometimes. Have you ever, you know, you said yes to loads of things, and maybe you're not tracking a menstrual cycle, maybe you're no longer having a menstrual cycle, and you're like, yes, 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 and then you get to another point in the month or a few weeks down the line, and you're like, oh my God, why the bloody hell did I say yes to so many things? And it's usually because you were having a lovely estrogen surge that day. So get to know what that estrogen yes feels like, because I'm always very cautious with those days. I love them, but I'm like, be careful, don't say yes to everything. You know, estrogen is a hormone of fertility, and but also creativity, inspiration. You know those days, right? When you're just like, oh, and you're like, I'm here, and life is good, you know, and you're just like, and then you think, oh, why can't I feel like this every day? And then it goes away again. um, Interestingly, estrogen also suppresses appetite. So, you know, those days when you're just not really that hungry and you're like, I'm all right, I could eat like a smoothie for breakfast, and then maybe I might not even have lunch. It's a massive appetite suppressant. Again, you know, before I came across this work, I'd be like, oh, you know, why can't I always just want to eat a salad? And then I learned that that is actually a load of rubbish, and we have different hormonal needs and different hormones driving our appetite. So this is estrogen. And if you've got a notepad, you know, I would really, you know, maybe later on this evening or throughout the coming weeks, maybe think about, you know, feeling into what estrogen feels like for you. I know for me, estrogen is rising when I just want to put on really banging house music on my Spotify playlist. I'm just like, yeah, yeah, and I'm dancing, I'm dancing, I'm dancing. That for me is my estrogen is peaking. And then when I come out the other side, I just want to listen to podcasts and very, very chill stuff, and you know, maybe even like more like gong bathy type of thing, sound healing stuff. So yeah, and it's easy, it's funny, it's quite fun to note these things. Then we have progesterone. So progesterone is a hormone that's produced in the second half of the cycle, and I'm going to show you the cycle later on, so don't worry too much about that. Now, progesterone is calming and soothing. It's almost like a natural Valium. So you know how I was talking about when I hit perimenopause, my anxiety, my mood swings, some of you have shared as well. When you don't have those levels of progesterone, your mental health is severely, severely impacted. It's beyond irritability. It can really feel quite desperate sometimes. We produce it in the second half of the menstrual cycle, and it's there to help prepare the body for pregnancy, because progesterone really helps to make the womb lining super, super, super juicy. And we produce it just in case. The body doesn't really know if you've got pregnant or not, but just in case, it will produce some progesterone in the second half of the cycle. But it can cause cravings. Why? Because we actually need a lot of glucose to make progesterone. So that's why, hello, sugar and carb cravings at this point in the cycle. And we all know those days, you know, when you wake up and you're just like, oh my God, give me all of the sugar. And you try to have a healthy breakfast. And then by lunchtime, not even lunchtime, you know, 10 a.m., you're like, I just want some biscuits, you know, when it's like, they are perfectly natural. And obviously, if you can feed these cravings in a more sort of nourishing way, that's great. But we're here to normalize these cravings, and we're here to say, you know, they are perfectly natural. Progesterone also helps you sleep, which is why some people feel sleepier in the second half of their cycle, and why in perimenopause and menopause, your sleep can be massively affected, because the first hormone to drop during perimenopause is progesterone. And oh my gosh, you will just lie there at night, just tossing and turning, and it is horrendous. And sometimes, if you're still having regular menstrual cycles, a few days before your period, you might also struggle to sleep, because that's when progesterone is really, really low as well. So if you ever have problems sleeping, you might want to be charting your cycle a bit, and looking to see where you are, because there may be a pattern. And then there's stuff you can do to support yourself. I think progesterone, sometimes people think they're lazy. I get clients saying, oh, I'm so lazy, I don't want to go to the gym, I don't want, and I'm like, enjoy the feeling. It's so nice to just feel calmer and, you know, just a bit more rested. So yeah, progesterone is, can you see that kind of estrogen and progesterone a bit yin and yangy, right? Like estrogen is like, oh, and progesterone is like, you know, they're kind of very, very different, but they complement each other. And a lot of hormonal imbalances come from estrogen being too high and progesterone being too low. And the women who shared earlier with fibroids, cysts, etc., they are often known as estrogen dominant conditions, which means your estrogen is much, much higher than your progesterone. And estrogen, one thing I didn't mention, is it encourages growth. It's wonderful for growth of cells, of tissues. But if there's too much estrogen and not enough progesterone to calm it down, what you get is too much tissue growing, you get fibroids growing, you get cysts growing, etc. And, you know, I only wish doctors knew this and just said, oh, it may be because you have too much estrogen. You know, I think you were also talking about the hair relaxers, chemicals in the environment, right? So they are what we call xenoestrogens. They mimic estrogen in the body, so they can also cause higher estrogen levels in the body and contribute to things like fibroids, to things like endometriosis, to things like polycystic ovaries, etc. So yeah, just being aware that these two hormones have to work together, and we need the right amounts of both. Otherwise, we can sort of like experience all sorts of symptoms. Testosterone, the one that we think we don't need. So we need testosterone for motivation and drive. Testosterone tanks quite a bit near perimenopause. Testosterone rises in the middle of our menstrual cycle. So it rises at ovulation. So you're not only feeling good because your estrogen is rising, you're feeling good because you've got testosterone. You know, it's testosterone is that feeling of, I'm the CEO of my life. I am bossing it today, you know? Really important for libido. I mean, I work with so many women who have just, you know, their libido has just completely disappeared, and it's never talked about in terms of maybe thinking about testosterone is the issue. I do hormone testing with clients. We test, the testosterone comes back on the floor, and there are ways to do that. You can even take testosterone, although sadly on the NHS, it's still male doses, which is absolutely bonkers. Don't get me started on that. Testosterone is fabulous for focus, for resilience. And like I said, it rises as ovulation. So, you know, maybe getting curious, how do you feel your testosterone feels for you? You know, like, you know, those days when I'm like, yeah, I'm unbeatable. It's that for me. That's my feeling. I'm like, whatever life throws at me today, I can handle. You know, it's for me, that's the feeling I get. So yeah, I just really want to bring awareness, because I think testosterone just doesn't get talked about very often when it comes to female hormones. You can have too much. There is a condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome, and that's when you have too much, and that can cause issues as well. You get women who maybe have a lot of body hair, a lot of acne, can also feel quite aggressive, you know, all of these things. And we don't want that either. We want that to be balanced. So how to feed your hormones. So we're just going to do now a little bit like the basics of how to eat for hormone health. The first thing is all our hormones are made from protein. So you need to give your body the raw materials, right? Like if it hasn't got them, it's going to take them and steal them from other places. So remember I said we will always prioritize making stress hormones. So if you're particularly stressed and you're not eating enough protein, your body is going to just steal protein from wherever it can, even from muscle, and there's never going to be enough protein to really make too many female sex hormones, right? So I see that in clients potentially who have restricted their eating for a long time or have followed low calorie diets or all of these things. And we really, I think also if you're a vegan or vegetarian, you just need to be aware and mindful of getting your protein in. And also, if you eat meat, you eat good quality meat, not crap meat, right? So it's important that we know like all how to support our the building block basically. And meat, chicken, fish, eggs, beans, tofu, nuts, seeds, they all provide really decent amounts of protein. And what I will say is you want to be aiming for about 30 grams of protein per meal. And honestly, when you start looking at that, it's quite a challenge sometimes. I've got clients who maybe start the day with a bit of toast and some butter or whatever, and then they'll have like a wrap or something that maybe has like a little bit of hummus or something, but probably not enough. And like in the evenings, maybe they're trying to be healthy, so they'll have like maybe some vegetables, but not put any protein in. And it's like, oh, we've got to get that protein in. So when it comes to nutrition, protein, 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 honestly, like I use this word so many times every day, I kind of bore myself, but that's just the way it is. Your hormones have to communicate. So you must eat good fats. So why? So basically cell membranes, every cell has this membrane that's got this nice fatty outer layer. And the hormones, remember, they are chemical messengers and they need to get into the cell to tell the cell what to do. So if your cell membrane is hard because you haven't eaten good fats, this is what happens. If you eat like a lot of processed foods or a lot of omega-6s or trans fats, then your cell membranes go hard and hormones can't go in and out. So we need lovely fats. That's what we mean by good fats. Fats that are anti-inflammatory and fats that keep our cell membranes super like, woo, that's the best way I can describe it, to be honest with you. What are good fats? Olive oil, avocados, avocado oils, nuts, seeds, nut oils, nut butters, rapeseed oil, coconut oil, oily fish, organic eggs. All of these are great. Also, please, please, please avoid trans fats. Lots of fried foods. Like I'm not saying never have some delicious fried thing, that's fine. But if that's what you're eating very regularly, that's going to be a problem. It's very inflammatory. And lots of vegetable oils are very, very inflammatory. Now, bit of an unpopular opinion, but please be careful with plant milks that have oils added to them. So the barista versions, obviously the creamy, delicious ones that everyone likes, they often have vegetable oils added to them. And sometimes they don't even really need to tell you what the vegetable oil is. They can just get away by saying vegetable oil. Now, if you're having this on a daily basis, I come across so many women who are like, oh, I've transitioned to plant milks. I really enjoy them. That's fine. But please be aware that some of the ones, especially the creamier ones, the reason they become creamy is because they've got oil added to them. If you want to make your coffee creamy, you can still add like, one that maybe has water and nuts and a little dollop of coconut oil yourself. Or if you're having like animal products, you can have like butter and whiz it up, pop it in a NutriBullet or a blender, and you will get a really delicious creamy coffee like that, or any drink. So always look for the ones that just have water and nuts and maybe sea salt. And it's not always a super expensive one. Sometimes the super cheap ones just are water and nuts. So just because, if you're having this on a daily basis and you're thinking it's good for you, it's a bit gutting when actually you're throwing in a load of inflammatory oils in on a daily basis. I have ruined many people's lives with this. They're like, you spoiled my coffee. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Oh, but you'll thank me for it. So yeah, just a little side one, really. I want to talk a little bit about womb loving foods, right? Like our womb space, and all the muscle and everything. So what is the womb like? Well, so many women experience cramps, pain, discomfort. And, it's a space where things can grow, like we've already mentioned, fibroids, cysts, etc. So anti-inflammatory foods are wonderful for our wombs. Things like ginger, turmeric, garlic, rosemary, throwing loads of turmeric into your cooking, or you can even do like a delicious sort of ginger, turmeric and garlic like shot every day. You just whiz it all up and down it. Like, how wonderful is that? Rosemary is particularly good herb for hormones. Rosemary is incredible for balancing estrogen. I've said it already, but I'm going to say it again. Protein, 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 because it's a muscle. Most of our womb is made from muscle, so it needs to be replenished and cared for by putting in good protein. And then this is, we talked about the chakra system earlier. So the sacral chakra, which is the area of our body, the chakra where our womb lives, is orange. And energetically, our womb really kind of resonates with orange foods, that energy. And this is what I really love when you get to like this level of kind of supporting ourselves, right? So foods like butternut squash, mango, oranges, nectar, all of these that I've listed here, so nourishing for our womb spaces. And if you really like this idea, there is a wonderful nutritionist and functional medicine practitioner called Deanna Minnick. I'll put her name here. She is the person who really came up with all of this. She's a hardcore scientist as well, but she has really gone down this route of food, spirituality, chakra systems, etc. And she's got some really wonderful free resources on her website. Follow her as well. She's fabulous. She's one of my, I met her once at a conference and I hugged her because I didn't know how to, I was so like overwhelmed, I couldn't speak, and I just hugged her, but I really love her work. And this is such a lovely thing to do maybe when you're on your period, or if you're feeling a bit down, or you want to connect with your womb space, maybe put together some really beautiful orange foods and an orange plate, and like align yourself with that chakra as well. Like really, really, this is like real food and energetics kind of stuff, which I love. So now I want to ask you, have you ever felt guilty for not feeling the same every day of the month? Have a little pause. I shared with you that I definitely did. I used to beat myself up time and time again. And funnily enough, I'm packing up to move to Spain now, and I discovered a lot of my old diaries recently. And wow, I mean, I cried because so many diary entries from about 10 years ago were like, what's wrong with me? Tomorrow I'm going to wake up earlier. I'm going to eat less. I'm going to do this. Why am I so tired? And I didn't have a concept of cyclical living at the time. And I was constantly beating myself up for not feeling the same every day, which is just bonkers. So anyway, if you have felt like that, I want to tell you, you're not the only one. And I also want to tell you this is why. So let's look at this screen here. Look at female hormones over the month, and then look at male hormones over the month. So look at us. We've got all these beautiful ups and downs, and we've got 3 lines. And look at men every day, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, the same every day. A man's testosterone is at the highest when he wakes up in the morning, and then it comes down at night, and it's the same every day. So we are living in a linear world that is dominated by the flow of male hormones. And this is I sort of not the best illustration, but I always say this, it's like trying to stick a square peg into a round hole. The way that we are living, women living in this society, we just are not fitting with, nothing has been set up for us, nothing, and I think I love what I think Sophia said earlier about, finally we're talking about menopause in the workplace. I mean, bloody hell, how many millennia have we been going through menopause, and finally there's menopause policies in some places. Finally we can actually say, I'm struggling today because of my hormones. I mean, it's insane. So let's go a bit deeper. So this is the female hormone cycle. So you can see we've got, and we're going to do this in a lot more detail. We've got estrogen, which is the pink, the progesterone, which is more the orange, and then testosterone, the yellow. Look at this. So my question to you is, how on earth can we expect to feel the same every day of the month if this is happening in our bodies every single day of the month, right? Like, and even if you are perimenopausal or menopausal, things do calm down but there are still fluctuations. So this applies to all of us, not in quite the same way, but it does. So yeah, this chart always blows my mind. So, these 4 changes are known as the inner seasons. And you can see I've labeled them here. We're going to go in a little bit more detail. And, if you are in menopause or you already, or in perimenopause, and maybe you're like, oh, there is a lot of anger because I thought, I wish I'd been taught this in school when I'm taught all this absolute nonsense. This is what I needed to know. And so you may be experiencing some anger or some like, not regret, but sadness. I think I feel very sad that I came to this so late on in my hormonal life. But the way I like to transform that sadness is to think, well, it's now on me to educate others and to tell others, like children, your children, grandchildren, anyone who will hear. I mean, I'll talk to anyone about this. A lady in Sainsbury's, my local Sainsbury's, she knows I do this work. So this is life-changing for all of us, and even communicating this to our partners, like how powerful for our partners to go, oh, okay, now I know that you're in this season, how can I support you? When I first started talking about this on Instagram, all my male friends would like laugh and take the piss out of me, but all of them individually, one by one, have come up to me over the years and they're like, do you know what, that thing that you taught is actually quite useful, like it really helps me in my relationship. And I'm like, thank you very much. So we need to include men in this conversation too. We all deserve to know this information. So it's a model that provides us with a roadmap for living, and I want to walk you through it a bit in a bit more detail. So you've got the outer seasons and the inner seasons, and all through what I'm going to be describing to you is always just like, how think about the outer seasons and how these seasons can manifest and how they feel inside of you, like, and how these hormones make you feel. So inner winter is menstruation, when we have our periods. Inner spring is when we finish our period and we're starting to get ready for ovulation. Ovulation is inner summer. That's when the egg pops out of the follicle and sort of sits in the fallopian tube, waiting to be fertilized. And then inner autumn is we finished ovulating and we're starting to build up for our next period. So again, you can see them here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to go through them in detail. And yeah, I just sort of encourage you to think, how does this make you feel? Is it something that makes you like a bit angry, or is it something that makes you feel excited? For me, it was everything makes sense now. Like after all these years of wondering what was wrong with me, there was nothing wrong with me, nothing. I just have hormones and a menstrual cycle. So let's go through the model in a bit more detail. And like I said, feel free to go and shout it from the rooftops tomorrow morning. From now onwards, this is the only thing I want you to talk about to everyone. So inner winter is when we have our periods. Hormones are at their lowest levels. Think about inner winter, right? We go inwards, we're outer winter. This is a time for resting, replenishing, wanting to retreat from the world. Remember that Beyonce hormone is low. We're not in the mood for going out, like partying or whatever. We retreat from the world, but it's also a time of deep intuition. I love this because actually, during our periods, our brain waves change, and we have a bit more of a theta state. So I don't know if you ever tried to meditate on your period, but it's actually, for most women, quite easy because our brains are already sort of working at a slightly different frequency. So this is a great time to meditate. I can meditate all day on my period. Like I'm just like, oh, and then ovulation, it's like brain's like, oh, do this, and it's like, okay. And it's great for accessing deep intuition. So many women I work with are like, I've got my period, it's such a pain, I just want to get on with things, and I'm like, well, how about focusing on these superpowers? How about doing this just now, instead of pushing and pushing and pushing? So look at, here it is, you can see it's stage 1, it's what I've circled there. So you can see the progesterone is low and the estrogen is low, right? From about days 1 to 7, everything is low, everything is quiet. That winter, that's why it's called winter, which I love so much. So inner winter foods, how can we eat when we're on our period? Iron-rich foods. We are losing a lot of iron, we are bleeding. So spinach, kale, all those leafy green vegetables, good quality meat if you eat meat, warm, nourishing foods. How do you eat when it's winter outside? You know, do you like eating like raw foods in winter and salads? I personally don't, but you know, anti-inflammatory foods. Remember, we said the womb loves anti-inflammatory foods, and especially at this time, we are more inflamed. We release chemicals called prostaglandins at this time that are inflammatory. And so putting in like that's, I've got some turmeric there, your ginger, doing those kind of shots, ginger, turmeric shots, wonderful for this time. Mineral rich foods, because our blood contains minerals. So seaweed is incredibly good for minerals. I love like seaweed crisps at this time, or I like making like a nice miso soup and putting some extra seaweed flakes. And estrogen rich foods, because our estrogen is low. So tofu is good at this time. Chickpeas are good at this time. And, you know, like I say, you can take this model really, really far, or you can keep it really simple and ask yourself, well, what do I like to do when it's winter outside? And does that resonate with how I'm feeling right now? And I think before we go any further, I want to say this is a general guide. These seasons feel differently for everyone. So please, please, please make this your own. What I would say is, as I'm deeper into perimenopause, I feel less wintry in my period now. I actually feel like I'm ovulating, and I feel like I'm in a summer when I'm on my period. So things change. So just use this as a model to make it your own. But these are the general things that most people will experience. So some hacks for when you've got your period. You're in a winter, you know, moving, make it gentle and nourishing, maybe gentle walks or gentle yoga. Self-care, replenishing stuff like baths, meditation, sleep, luxuriate in that sort of like deeply nourishing self-care. And work and productivity, you know, you can be productive when you're feeling like this, but tap into the superpowers of this time, like ideation, like dreaming big, thinking about what you want, you know. The longer I've done this work, the more I use, or not so much now because I feel very energized in my period, but in when I had more of a traditional cycle, I used to use this time to dream into what I wanted my business to be like, what offerings I wanted to put out, what, you know, all sorts of aspects of my life, like the dreaming phase. You can also ask yourself what's working, what's not working. There is a lot of clarity at this time if you allow it to be. Take lots of breaks, lots and lots of breaks, right? When we're on our periods, we deserve to take lots of breaks and focus on one thing at a time. Those low hormones, especially that low estrogen, means our brain power isn't great. We can be a bit brain foggy, and that's okay. You know, the brain foggy sometimes is quite nice for sitting there and not doing very much because you won't have all those crazy thoughts coming in. So inner spring is now we build up to ovulation. Estrogen is starting to come up. It starts when our period finishes. So the last day of our period would be the last day of inner winter, and then inner spring is the next day. This is when you're starting to feel a bit more like, ooh, inspired. It's like you're waking from a deep sleep. You're like, oh, you start wanting to be seen a bit more in the world. I don't know if you know that feeling when you're like, oh, today I'm ready to come out of the baggy jumper and put on a slightly nicer dress. You know what I mean? That kind of like, whereas 3 days before you're like, I am not wearing a dress. I'm wearing my biggest bin bag kind of look, and that is enough, right? But there is a fragility to this time. I mean, think about spring, especially spring in the UK. It's fragile. You know, we get a couple of nice days and then it's stormy again. This is very much a very transition sort of period in our cycle. So you might want to go out in the world. If you're somebody who's always been a big doer and you've done lots of things, you're so glad to have that pesky period out of the way. And you're like, yes, but just be cautious with these few days in your cycle. And this is what it looks like hormonally. You can see it also gets called the follicular phase in more medical terms. You can see, right? Look at that estrogen, that yellow line is starting to come up. Not the progesterone, that's going to wait until the second half, but it's that estrogen starting to rise, that Beyonce hormone coming to kind of starting to show her face. Foods for this time. I'm going to say it again, but we need a lot of protein because our energy is rising and we're also preparing for ovulation. Your good fats, we've talked about those already. Hormones need to start communicating and getting in and out of the cells well. B12 rich foods. B12 is very important for egg health, follicle health, and ovulation. So things like eggs are amazing. I always say an egg for an egg. You're producing an egg, eat eggs. If you are vegan or vegetarian, especially vegan, you need to think about supplementing or doing things like nutritional yeast and really topping up your B12. Fermented foods are really good at this time. So things like kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurts. And I'll tell you why, because as estrogen is starting to rise, actually, we need to start detoxifying it more effectively. Because if we don't detoxify it now, it bites us on the other side of our cycle. So detoxify your rising estrogen now, and it will thank you later on. And these fermented foods are really good for binding to used up estrogen in the gut, and then they leave our bodies. So these are some of my inner spring favorite foods. Some of your hacks. Movement. Time to start sweating, because actually sweating is a wonderful one for detoxifying estrogen. Trying new things. That estrogen rising means you're more able to do new things at this point. Dancing, moving, it's all this kind of stuff. Self-care, like great time for decluttering, great time for using that rising energy, learning something new. If you're going to go to like maybe a new exercise class or something, this is a great time to go, because if you went a week before, that low estrogen, your brain will be like, I don't know what I'm doing. And now you're like, oh, I can do this. I've even noticed that I drive differently in the different phases of my cycle, to the point where sometimes just a few days before my period, I sometimes have to say to my husband, you need to do the parking, because my spatial awareness is 0 today. And I'm just like, I can't do it. But make time to pause, really make time, because the temptation is to go absolutely nuts at this point. You're feeling that energy and you want to really go for it. Make a bit of time to pause. Work on productivity, great time for brainstorming. Like this is the time when all the ideas are coming in. You maybe had the inspiration and the deep downloads when you were bleeding, when you had your period, but now it's like, how am I going to put these ideas into place? Maybe you had this amazing, incredible idea for work or a great solution to something. Now it's time to start thinking how that estrogen is firing up your brain and helping you make these kind of like decisions. Then we've got inner summer, which is ovulation. So this is estrogen at its peak. We feel sexy, we feel in our flow, we've got limitless energy. Those are the days when you're like, why can't I feel like this every single day? Well, it's too much. I'm here to tell you that as well. Can also be a bit overwhelming. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced those days when you're like, life is amazing, it's all so much, oh my God, it's that kind of feeling a bit sometimes. What does it look like? Look at that peak now, right? Estrogen, that yellow line coming up and then slowly coming down. Ovulation doesn't last that long, 3 days max, 3 or 4 days. So it tends to be the shortest part of the cycle. It tends to be the one that everybody loves the most and the one that we're saddest to let go of in general. So what foods can we eat at this time? I love broccoli sprouts. You see those little sprouts there in the bowl. You can buy them in health food shops because they are really good for detoxing and balancing estrogen, especially when it's this high. We've talked about the good fats again. We need a lot of good fats at this time. Make sure that estrogen is getting into the cells properly, and a lot of antioxidants. So loads and loads of fresh colors, crunchy. Every single fruit and vegetable that has a color will have different antioxidants in it. And how do we eat when it's summer outside? If you do nothing else, just think about that. How do we eat when it's summer outside? And how do you want to do that in your inner summer? Some of the hacks: movement, ramping it up. This is a time to really go for it. You may find, if you've ever sort of gone to the gym and not really noticed where you are in your cycle, this might be the day when you're like, oh, I can do this. I can actually do this. Or you do like a personal best, or you lift heavier weights, or you feel like, I want to do another class. This is the time to really go for it. This is the time to do the HIIT, the power yoga, all of those things. The self-care is like getting out there. Maybe, this is the time to enjoy a glass of wine, meet friends for coffee, socialize. It's not to say you don't socialize the rest of your cycle, but you possibly can, and get to understand how your body feels at this point. This is the best time to do this stuff. This is when you want to do it, and not a week later when you're like, oh no, why did I say yes? And this is, like I said earlier, this is when we say yes a lot. So careful with what you're saying yes to now, because a week later you might not be so happy you said yes. Productivity and work, collaboration, like we said, estrogen is people pleasing, it's outgoing, we want to be out there. So big meetings, writing copy, being bold, asking for a pay rise. Don't forget our testosterone is also high. So we can be like, you know, this is me and I bloody well deserve all this stuff. So this is what we can really focus on at this point in our cycle. And now we come to in autumn, the phase in the menstrual cycle that everybody sort of dreads the most. You know, for good reason, I think sometimes. There's a complicated dance between estrogen and progesterone at this point in the cycle, which I'll show you in a minute. This is when we're starting to slow down. We're starting to feel sleepy. Some great sort of like powers here. Evaluation, you know, the estrogen goggles are coming off. You're no longer seeing the world with rose-tinted estrogen eyes, and you're seeing things more clearly for what they really are. So great for evaluation. You can get quite irritated. You know, these hormones are dancing around, they're a bit complicated. It can be a tumultuous time, and it is where PMS lives. So let's look at what these hormones are doing. You can see, right? Ovulation, estrogen's dropping. Then we do have a smaller rise about 7 days later, and then the estrogen comes down. And then if you have ovulated, look at your progesterone. It'll come up, the blue line peaks and then comes down. What I want you to also know is if you do not ovulate, we don't ovulate every month, you do not produce progesterone. So sometimes when you have horrific PMS, it could be a sign that that month you haven't ovulated. And young women don't ovulate. You know, women in their 30s don't, and 40s. It just becomes more regular as we get older. We ovulate less. But yeah, can you see it's a bit of I call it like the sort of the tango of the hormones. That's why it's tumultuous. There's a lot going on. And you see those final few days, just before day 28, everything's tanking. That's when we're really building up from our period. That's when we're losing our shit. That's when everything is going to pot a lot of the time. But how powerful to be able to come to look at this and go, okay, I get why this is happening. So in autumn, I've already told you, we have cravings at this point. Our bodies need more glucose, and we need to support ourselves in that way. So complex carbs, sweet potatoes, you know, delicious brown rice, loads of beans, all of these things are so lovely. And I haven't mentioned it here, I'm not a calorie counter, but we do need to eat nearly 200 calories more at this point in our cycle. So please don't try to suppress your appetite. Know that in ovulation, you won't want to eat as much. Everything balances itself out. We need a lot of calcium and magnesium at this point. So things like watercress, all the green leafy vegetables are great. Fiber-rich foods. We need to be really pulling out that estrogen now, but also at this point, you can get more constipated because progesterone is more constipating. I say feed your cravings, and I have done a lot of work on cravings. I did a big workshop on cravings a while ago, and it's like really giving your body what it needs and giving them the most nourishing options. But you know, sitting there and going, oh, what's wrong with me? Oh, you know, that's never ever going to really get you anywhere. Making peace with food, I think there's something about this time that can really help us redefine our relationship with food. You know, my sort of a lot of the work I do with clients at this point is, what do you want to eat? How much do you want to eat? And can you prepare the biggest, most delicious breakfast and lunches and dinners that feed what your body is asking you for? How liberating is that when all our lives, you know, so many of us have been influenced by diet culture, wellness culture, you know, like, and we've got all these like really like internal, like sort of like conflicts, these thoughts that are coming up like, oh, I shouldn't, oh. And again, how would you eat when it's autumn outside, right? Like autumnal, delicious. I love the autumn. The color of autumn is orange, and the sacral chakra is orange, right? And our wombs need those orange foods. So eat lots of orange foods. Autumn hacks, movement. Start taking it down a notch now. Maybe more like yoga, flowy, detoxy stuff, a bit of walking. Just listen to what you need. Self-care. This is a time for huge boundary setting. Huge. This is when we're like, no, I don't want to go out tonight. You know, when you're like, people are like, oh, come on, don't be boring. And every bone in your body is like, I don't want to go out. And you still say yes. And you're like, oh, why did I say yes? This is the time to start boundary setting. We need to sleep more. Remember, our progesterone is high at that peak, and then it goes out. So we may not sleep for the last few days very well of our cycle. Nesting, don't forget, progesterone is the hormone of pregnancy. We're preparing, like your body won't know whether it's pregnant or not for about 2 weeks. So it prepares regardless. And it doesn't matter whether you want to have children or not, your body is always biologically going to help you do that. So there's a nesting element. I don't know if you do that. For me, it's like cleaning weird stuff, like really weird things. Like my one is the washing machine drawer for some reason. I'm like, oh, and then I start like poking around and I'm like, okay, I am in my inner autumn. For some reason, it really irritates me at that point in my cycle. Very important to have a clean washing machine drawer. Productivity, attention to detail is high. This is such a good time for editing, reviewing, if you're somebody who writes copy or somebody who is in charge of a lot of detailed work, this is a really good time to go in and swoop in and just wipe things, like really cut out all the stuff that you don't need. Good time for reviewing and a good time for wrapping things up. So if you work in project-based stuff as well, sometimes, really channeling these hormones at this point can be really helpful. So how do we get started with all this? And I appreciate that some of you today have already probably perimenopause or in menopause, but, inform your children, your grandchildren, everyone. Tracking your cycle, maybe using an app or maybe going for an old school calendar or a journal. And really the place to start is day one is the day when you start your period. If you have a little bit of spotting, that doesn't count as day one. It's the first day of full proper flow, when it's really starting to come. That's day one. And then, just maybe write a few words like, oh, sleepy, or make it your own. There's no wrong or right way to track. But starting with something small and notice how the inner seasons feel for you. Like I said, there's no wrong or right way to experience them, but there is something very powerful about looking back and seeing if there are patterns as well. Like when I first started doing this, my worst day in my whole cycle is day 10. Now, day 10 in theory is building up for ovulation, feeling amazing. My body couldn't quite handle that estrogen peak, and it would give me very, very bad anxiety. Now, I've been experiencing this anxiety for a very long time, and it was only when I started tracking it, I was like, it's always on day 10. And that really helped me put things in place. I talked to my husband about it. I never booked in clients for day 10. I took a bucket load of magnesium. I meditated and I tried not to put myself in the way of anything that would make me too anxious. And it really, really helped. And that way, another way to do it as well is notice patterns, but also, pick one little thing that we've talked about today. Or if you go on to read a book about this, one food or one hack that can help you connect. So it might be, when I've got my period, I'm going to eat some spinach one day. When I'm in a spring, I might go and get some fermented foods, or I might exercise in a different way. I might go to a new exercise class, just pick something we've talked about and just sort of build it in. And that's how cyclical living starts, which is so, so beautiful. So we finished the cyclical living stuff. Now we're going to go into a bit of perimenopause, like what the hell is happening to me? For those of you who are having regular cycles, I honestly believe it's so important to not be like in denial that this isn't going to happen to us, because I was in denial. I'd be like, oh, this is not going to happen to me, but it does, right? So let's just educate ourselves now. And also because people in your life might be going through perimenopause who could need support. So what the hell is happening? This is now a chart of the estradiol, the hormone that's dotted, is the main form of estrogen. Yes, there are lots of different estrogens, but I'm not going to go into that today. And then we've got progesterone, and we now know what these hormones are like, right? So let's have a look at this chart very, very sort of quickly. Look at childhood. Progesterone and estradiol are low. And then in the teen years, look at that estradiol. That estrogen is going up and up and up and up. And the progesterone is going up. Then our reproductive years, our estrogen is generally high, but fluctuates a bit, and our progesterone goes up and down quite drastically every month. And then look at good old perimenopause. People think that perimenopause is just everything dropping. It is dropping overall, but look at that estrogen. It is like a roller coaster. And it's sometimes known as reverse puberty, because if you look at the teen section, it's kind of going the other way, right? But backwards, which is why we are in horrific moods, why everyone is pissing us off. why we're getting spots, it's all of this stuff going on. And look at the estradiol line, those pink lines. I mean, gosh, that is a hormonal roller coaster. So yeah, like I said, look at the team there. So we still experience inner seasons when we are perimenopausal, but you can actually experience them all in one day. So you might wake up in the morning and you might be like, oh, I feel quite summery today. And then by lunchtime, you're like, I am in inner autumn and about to punch somebody's face in. And then you might be like, oh, feeling a bit better, going into winter. And this is exactly the phase I'm in my life right now. And I did do a podcast episode with somebody called Kate Codrington. She's fabulous. She's like a perimenopause queen. And she just talks about literally inner seasons shift every hour when we are at this point. But if you've done the work beforehand, or if you understand the model of the inner seasons, you can use it to navigate it now. But everything really is turned on its head a little bit in perimenopause. So what does this feel like hormonally? Low progesterone. I've already talked about this with my personal story. Like the mood swings are really, really challenging. And I actually saw something come up yesterday on Instagram, a very big menopause doctor talking about, there's a study that's not really been talked about a lot, that women from the ages of 43 to 49 are the most likely age group to commit suicide. So these mood swings are not to be trivialized. These mood swings are serious, and I would even go as far as to say as mood disorders. So, if you ever experience this, you please, 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 please reach out. Please communicate to people how you're feeling, and refuse to be gaslit and just be told, oh, it's just perimenopause. These feelings are very, very real. Headaches are another big feature of low progesterone. Headaches around your period or just before your period. I used to have really bad menstrual headaches for a few years. They've gone away now, thank God. Difficulty conceiving. So if you are, like in your maybe late 30s and you're struggling, you're trying to have a baby and you can't, you may just not be ovulating as often anymore. And your fertility may be sort of like compromised, because it's a sign that ovulation hasn't happened. So this is what low progesterone can feel like at this point in perimenopause. Estrogen, the fluctuating estrogen, right? Like what this feels like: hot flashes, night sweats, sleep issues, dryness, like vaginal and everywhere. Sometimes it's like dry eyes. Some of my clients are like, oh my God, I need to put eye drops in 20 times a day. And a dryness that just, no matter how many creams, oils, potions you put on, you feel like a prune, basically. Again, headaches are also an issue because of that fluctuating estrogen. Also the mood swings, some of these things overlapped. UTIs, frequent urinary tract infections, because interestingly, estrogen controls the pH of the vagina and of the urethra. And as estrogen goes up and down, it changes the pH and the bacteria change. So it's really common at this point to have UTIs. Again, get help for this. Don't be dismissed. Estrogen going up and down increases our risk of osteoporosis, until eventually when we get to menopause, we have full osteoporosis. We can potentially have osteoporosis. And also heart health, which is something people don't talk about a lot. But actually, one of the biggest killers for women in menopause, post-menopause, is heart disease. We're all talking about all sorts of other things like cancer, and of course, that's also a risk. But actually, it's the heart stuff that we really, really need to be thinking about. So, sorry, it sounds like a pretty depressing picture, but there's lots and lots and lots that can be done. But I wanted to put these in here so you are aware of what these things feel like, and you can get help. So navigating perimenopause, I really wanted to give you all my real, like the ones that give you the biggest bang for your buck. I've said it once, I've said it a million times. It's protein, but now you need to go even more hardcore, because what happens is we become insulin resistant at this point. So insulin is a hormone that helps us control blood sugar. And once we get into our late 30s, early 40s, we're not so good at responding to insulin, which means if we're eating a carb-heavy diet, it really, really impacts our hormones, our moods, our body composition, all of these things. So, we have to really step up the protein game here, like really have to step it up. If you think you're eating enough protein, I would say double that. Move. We need to move. Like, movement is what's going to really, really help us. It'll help the insulin resistance. It'll help the hormones. And alcohol is a biggie at this point. We've all experienced this. In your 20s, you can drink. I mean, we probably have, like, daughters or relatives or whatever. You watch them, they go out, they drink like fish, and the next day they get up and they're fine. In your 20s. In your 30s, you're a bit more frazzled, and in your 40s, you have a glass of wine and then you can't get out of bed for a day or two. It's to do with the liver, it's to do with the load, and we just can't handle it anymore. So I really urge you to get very sort of honest about your alcohol consumption at this point and think about reducing it. It is a game changer for hormones at this point. Boundaries. We talked about boundaries in the sense of the menstrual cycle in autumn, but now you have to set, like, honestly, like, the biggest boundaries of your life, because your tolerance for shit is zero. Basically, you're not going to put up with any shit, so you have to set firm boundaries and get clear on your boundaries. What are they? What are you available for? What are you not available for? This is a truly, truly transformational time if we let it be. Like, also taking control over our body. This is when we, and this is what we're saying at the very beginning of the call, right? Thank God for social media. Thank God for being able to get information at our fingertips, reach out to experts, educate ourselves. If you feel you need support and you go to a doctor and you are gaslit, refuse to be, go to see someone else, ask for a second opinion, reach out to people like myself, or, I'm not saying we have to work necessarily together, but, I'm always happy to, like, point you in the right direction. I've got a big community of like, other therapists that we all kind of collaborate together. I can nearly always point you in the direction of somebody who can help you. And it's kind of what I love doing. If you're sat there and you're like, things aren't right, something's up, I need support, please don't sit there thinking that you are the problem, because you are not the problem. The system is the problem. And, who do you want to become? This is an opportunity for us to really, really transform and to shed and to be a completely different person, which the people around us find quite difficult when we turn around and we're like, right, I am not doing this shit anymore. Actually, I'm going to be a completely different person. Who do you want to become? I want to talk about very quickly hot flashes. So what's the deal with them? So basically, when estrogen starts lowering, the hypothalamus, remember that lovely bit in the brain, has a thermostat, and it becomes really sensitive to changes in body temperature. So when your brain thinks the body's too warm, it starts a whole series of events, which basically culminate in a hot flash to help you cool down. So it is your body trying to help you. It's not helpful at all when it is happening. But I do find it's quite nice sometimes when you're like, okay, well, it's just my body trying to help. So what are the things you can do? You can eat phytoestrogens, which are plant estrogens. These are chemicals in plant foods that mimic estrogen. And these are not dangerous. These are beneficial. It's not like the toxic chemicals in the environment. The body knows what to do with these. So chickpeas, flax seeds, a bit of tofu, red clover, all of these things are phytoestrogens. You can just Google them. There's loads of lists out there. Balance your blood sugar, lots and lots of protein. Don't overdo it on the carbs. Alcohol is an absolute bugger when it comes to hot flashes. Caffeine is another one. I know I'm taking away all your joys. I do apologize. Smoking is a big one as well. Spicy foods, because the spicy foods cause internal heat, and the hypothalamus is like, oh, it's getting hot. Let me cool you down. And then, you can go, have a massive flash. Some supplements can help, like soy isoflavones. Turn down the thermostat at home. You might just need to be in a slightly cooler space. And there is now some really fabulous underwear as well that you can get that is specifically for hot flashes. Because one of the things that happens is when the sweat cools, you get really, really cold and clammy. And this underwear absorbs the sweat from the hot flashes. Some great companies doing some really amazing things to support us these days. Menopause, it's not all doom and gloom. It really, really, really isn't. Look at the chart at the end, right? So things calm down substantially. Your progesterone is very, very low now, like it was in childhood. And your estrogen, look, it's there and it's slight fluctuations, which is why you will still experience seasonal change, you know, these inner seasons, but they'll be very different, and they won't necessarily be monthly. They might be more daily. Some women who want to carry on working with the concept of being cyclical like to connect with the moon cycles at this point, and you can start seeing how you feel throughout a lunar cycle as well. But I mean, look at this. We know, you know, if you look at perimenopause and that massively fluctuating estrogen, now when we get here, look at that lovely gentle estrogen. Things are calmer, we're more stable, we're more secure in who we are. And women are beginning to challenge the negative portrayal of menopause, right? By the media and society in general. Like there's been some celebrities doing great work, like Davina McCall, lots of women being very vocal about their menopause experience, which is incredible for us because it's actually finally being talked about. And, you know, again, it's really about, it's a period of transformation. Who do you want to be? Who are you letting go of? You know, if you're somebody who's had children and you've worked and you've done all of this stuff and you've probably given so much all your life, you know, for most people, the children are now growing up, maybe they're leaving home, space is opening for you again. How do you want to fill that space? Who do you want to be? You know, traditionally, when we used to gather around campfires, a menopausal woman was a woman of extreme power and wisdom. And, you know, it's only modern society, because she's no longer useful, she can no longer have children, that we get shunted to the side. But a menopausal woman is a force to be reckoned with. And how amazing to have this second opportunity. You know, perimenopause, they now call the second spring, you know, like we're moving into a whole other period of our lives. So again, if you've got your journal, and even if you're nowhere near this phase, start journaling on it now. See what's coming through, you know, like there's Red School are a great like organization set up by the founders of the Inner Seasons model. And they have a whole menopause course, a menopause awakening course, and a book. And I went on their course quite a few years ago, probably about 6 years ago. And I was a bit reluctant because I was like, oh, I'm not really there yet. But I'm so glad I did, because it really helped me to start subconsciously and consciously start preparing and opening for what's coming. And I'm actually excited for this next phase. I cannot wait. So who do you want to be in this next chapter or your life? Quick word on HRT, yes or no, yay or nay. It can be a lifesaver, but it's not the cure-all of everything. It's not, you know, there's a lot of stuff in the media that's like, you know, HRT is amazing, blah, blah, blah. It can be really, really helpful. But you need to work on other stuff, you know, your digestion, your stress. Remember what we said, your perception of life, your liver detoxification, your lifestyle, your thyroid. The solution to increase HRT is not the solution. It's to work on everything else. And one size doesn't fit all, which is unfortunately what happens quite often when you see a GP. I think, Sophia, you were saying that you weren't enjoying the gel. I mean, getting the right HRT for you is hard work, and doctors don't want to know. So you have to go back again and again and again, and you have to learn about the HRT yourself, you know, or reach out to people who can help you, and go back and say, I do not get on with these patches. I do not get on with this gel. I mean, full disclosure, I am on HRT. I had to go on HRT because of my suicidal thoughts, and they stopped when I started the HRT. I'm very privileged. I can work with a hormone expert who I can pay to help me, with a doctor who checks my bloods every 6 months, and we adjust it. But what happened recently was I picked up a prescription, and I actually got my husband to pick it up because we were going away, and we weren't living in the same country at the time. I was meeting him in Greece for our holiday, and I didn't think to tell him, you must get me specific types of estrogen and progesterone. And he turned up with 2 different types of estrogen and progesterone. And I started taking the progesterone, and I didn't sleep for the first 5 nights of my holiday because it was the wrong progesterone. I was really, really anxious. And I honestly felt like I was up all night clubbing. He'd close his eyes to go to sleep, and I'd be like that, wide awake. And even though it was body identical and everything was the same, the preparation was different, and my body couldn't get on with it. Equally, the estrogen gel I was given, I didn't even start it because I reached out to my doctor, and she said, this one has a history of causing anxiety in women. That's how specific this stuff is, right? So If you are ever considering HRT, reach out. I mean, I'm happy to like give you some advice or point you in the right direction. And you don't even have to reach out to me. But if you get put on HRT and you feel worse, you must fight to get that changed and to get the right HRT for you. And yeah, don't be afraid of your doctor. Really don't. Like, you know your body. You really, really know your body. So, right, we're getting there. What have we learned? What hormones are and how they can impact everything, how they are interconnected, what the sex hormones feel like. Remember our Beyonce, our testosterone, progesterone, how to feed your hormones, protein, 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 why we're not meant to feel the same every day, the inner seasons model, the main things to do in perimenopause, and how menopause is an opportunity to reinvent ourselves. Come and say hello. I am on Instagram. I think maybe one or two of you follow me already. Come to the website. Drop me an email. You know, I love a good old-fashioned email. And listen to the podcast that I do with my lovely co-host Nat. And comment, review, like whatever you want. Yeah, and I've got a couple of freebie stuff going on Instagram as well. I think it's free hormone salads at the moment. Yeah, I don't even know because moving has thrown me off a little bit. And that's it. Thank you so much for today. I have really, really enjoyed being here with you.
Hey, yeah, there was so much there, so much, really, really generous in what you've shared with us tonight. Giulietta, as I said, I've got pages and pages, and I will be reviewing and looking back and sharing. But the complexities, even the slide where you showed the hormone testosterone in men, quite a steady up, down, and then in women, it's just all over the place. So even that says,
Yeah.
they just don't know how the hell they are,
No.
working with us. So we do need to empower ourselves with knowledge like this and the books you've recommended. So yeah, there's a lot there. It's just yeah, really, really grateful. Thank you. How do we get it into schools, Giulietta? Because I know that's really where it needs to start, right? We start our
Yeah.
periods, we're usually, as you say, 9, 10, 11, and there's nothing well, there's a lot now with social media, but there's a lot of conflicting stuff out there as well.
It's
Um,
it's hard. I have friends who work specifically in this area. They are period educators, you know.
mm,
And it's an ongoing battle trying to get into schools, um, and trying to get funding. The private schools are not really very interested. There's still a lot of taboo, or they'll say, "Oh, we're already doing it," and you're like, "Well, show me what you're doing," and it's woefully lacking in everything.
mm,
Period products, how to use these. Like, I was never
mm,
taught how to use a pad or a
mm,
tampon or anything, you know, like I didn't know
mm,
anything for years. Like, how powerful to go in and go, this is a menstrual cup, this is a period pant, this is how you put them,
mm,
this is what you do,
mm,
you know?
mm, mm.
So, yeah,
You
but it
need to
is,
write your book.
yeah, I do.
Get it in school.
Yeah, there's some good teams
Oh,
out there, actually. They really are.
mm,
I think it's just what we're doing now, this grassroots stuff, like talking
yeah.
to your daughters and mums of your daughters' friends, and
Hmm.
literally one little conversation at a time is really
Yes.
where it's going at the moment.
Yeah.
But don't
Yeah.
underestimate the power of it.
Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you. But yeah, thank you so much, Giulietta.
Thank you.
And ladies, we say
Bye.
good night as
Bye.
well. Have a fabulous week,
Bye.
and we'll see you next week, everybody. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.